Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my final recap, breakdown, and review of the last episode of Season 1 of American Horror Stories, Episode 7, which was titled Game Over, and that is a perfect title to sum up my thoughts about this series. It's finally over. But look, we're going to break down the episode, full spoilers ahead. We're going to talk about the series as a whole. I'm going to share my rankings of all 7 episodes with you all, and then we're going to have like a discussion about Season 10 of American Horror Story double feature. So this is going to be a fun breakdown. I hope you guys are excited for it. Before we dive into the discussion, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you all can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this discussion of American Horror Stories, make sure to like and share this video. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in the comments, light up the comments, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about this episode. Let's talk about the series as a whole, this spinoff. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? Share your rankings of all 7 episodes, of course, if you've seen all 7 of them. And then let's talk about anticipation level, excitement level for Season 10 of American Horror Story double feature. Let's talk about it all in the comments below. So again, this is going to be a great video. I'm going to have a fun time discussing this with you all. I'm going to leave time codes and chapters in the description so you can kind of know what topics we're tackling, this, that, and the other. So let's get into it. Starting off with episode 7, Game Over. Just my initial thoughts. I just got done watching the episode roughly 20-30 minutes ago, and just general takeaway from the episode. It was a perfect finale to end off this horrendous spinoff. We've reviewed it for the last 7 weeks. There were some highs, but honestly, let's talk about the highs. They really weren't that great. It looked like highs because everything else was so trash. But there were some moments that were okay, but there were just so many like bad writing, bad acting, bad storytelling. And this episode truly encapsulates all that stuff from season 1 of American Horror Stories. More or less the cons that I had about this spinoff. I don't know where the writing, where the storytelling, where they got these actors from, because it was just, some of the actors obviously were legacy characters and actors that we've seen from American Horror Story, but some of these new up-and-coming actors were just bad. And the only way I can justify some of the bad writing from this episode in particular and also the series is Ryan Murphy and the creators, this has to be a spoof. This has to be a parody of American Horror Stories. They said to themselves, you know what, let's just make fun of ourselves. Let's just poke fun of the mythology. Let's get some bad actors. Let's get some bad writing. Let's just burn money. Let's just waste money, guys, and make something really bad. And I think that's how they came up with this show. So in this series, and this episode really shows that. So that's my take on this episode. But let's get into the actual recap and break it all down as we open up the episode with these American Horror Story fans, which I'm not going to lie. Again, I mentioned that this episode had some of the higher points. The fact that they had these super fans is kind of a meta nature of us being fans, right, of watching this show. And I thought that should have been the whole kind of backbone of this spinoff, is just like, you know, acknowledging American Horror Story, maybe being a show itself, maybe being this kind of, you know, set in reality type of thing. And they kind of play within that. And we meet Connie and Dylan. Again, they're super fans of the lore. And we learn that they are going to the murder house. You know, it's an Airbnb like they wanted to happen in episode 1. And they name drop Hotel Cortez, which is obviously the same hotel from American Horror Hotel season 5. So I'm just like, okay, this is interesting. Let's see where it goes. Again, I wasn't excited to go back in the murder house, especially after what they did in episode 1 and 2. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for the ride. I'm going to sit back, relax, and watch it. But then they make themselves comfortable, which, by the way, at first it didn't click for me. I'm like, who is that actress? She looks just like Miley Cyrus. And it comes to find out this is Miley Cyrus's younger sister. I believe her name is Noah Cyrus. I don't know. She has like a long list of like acting, because her acting in that gentleman Dylan. Oof. But either way, they have a fun time. They get comfortable by having sex, again, a trope in horror genres, but they realize that there's someone in the house, and then they start to find the bodies laying around the house. They make it very apparent that, again, that American Horror Story is a show in this world, and we'll get to the whole meta nature of the video game, but they acknowledge that American Horror Story is a fake reality. But then they're like, oh, this is real, there's bodies here. And you know, the one thing that I thought was pretty funny about the episode, and I don't know if this is true or false, I love Sarah Paulson, and apparently they say in this episode that Sarah Paulson had some gripes with Roanoke, which wasn't the best season, but I had fun with it. That was the one with Lady Gaga, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But nonetheless, we move forward and they make their way to the basement. they come across these random girls, and we get a flashback, and this was kind of spoiled like a week ago that this character was going to make an appearance, and it's Dylan McDermott as Ben, as the girls come to the house, they get murdered, they get trapped in the house, and this is where the characters, Dylan and his girlfriend, are murdered, and they're killed, and then, we're thinking that, oh, this is crazy. This is American Horror Story Murder House all over again. But no, they pull out of this kind of fake situation, and we find out that it's a video game. This is one of two really bad twists, in my opinion, but it's all fake, right? So we kind of find that out in this American Horror Story video game, and this is where we meet the main characters in this story, real or fake story, hell or heaven story. We have Michelle and her son Rory, and she is a video game designer, and she wants to please her son. She's a very obsessive mother who wants to get the attention of her son, and again, they give us this exposition of how we as fans view American Horror Story, as we as fans want to go to Murder House, and what make Murder House so special is just like this exposition is like, okay, I don't need this meta-ness of how I am as a fan. It just felt a little bit too self-indulgent. Again, this is like a parody. Again, I had to think this is a spoof. They're spoofing us, ladies and gentlemen, but nonetheless, the video game intro was pretty cool, I'm not going to lie. But we go into the gist of the story that we think that's at hand. As Michelle makes her way to Murder House, she purchases it for $100,000, and again, it's just like, okay, stupid character, why are you buying this house? But again, it's all part of the facade, right? So we see that we get this unnecessary plot with Michelle and her ex-husband giving her exposition dump, letting us know as an audience that she's obsessive behavior and all that stuff, and her son's really not. They don't really have a good relationship, and she pays a visit back to the house, and she comes across the past of the girls that were killed in episode 1 of this season. We get the return of one of the worst, if not the worst character of this spinoff, and that's Scarlett, as she's making her way back to visit. I take that back. Scarlett isn't the worst. It's Ruby. Ruby and Scarlett are the two worst characters in this spinoff, and they're having a reunion where I'm just like, I don't need this right now, but let's see where it goes. So I literally tuned out at this point when Dylan McDermott, Ben's character, is talking to Michelle about what makes the house so special. Again, I was bored. I was extremely bored at this point in the episode, and I literally checked out at this point. But then she wants to learn about the house and how she can improve on her video game. And then we get Scarlett, who kills her, and we get this ridiculous kiss between Ruby and Scarlett. We fast forward to a year later. Michelle goes to visit her annoying-ass son, Rory, who's upset with her for dying, and he says that he wants to burn the house down. She says no, because there's actually good spirits in there. And lo and behold, wrapping up the episode, or I should say this portion of the episode, Rory goes to the house. He burns the house. Well, before that, Ruby wants to stop him and kill him, and texts Scarlett. She makes her way over there. She tries to stop him. He drops the match. The house catches on fire, and I'm thinking, oh, did he die, and now is he trapped in the house with them? But no, it kind of shows out, and again, the writing at this point, the whole back and forth with Ruby trying to stop him was just horrendous. We come out of this, and we wrap up the episode with 3 years later, and we see that Scarlett is house hunting. She buys this condo. She tells the realtor that, hey, this is built on the grounds of Murder House. Do you tell your clients that? He says no, and she says, I'm going to buy it for $1 million. Oh, where do you get this money from? As we find out later in the episode that she hates her life, and she hasn't really made anything of her life, but now we learn that she's an assassin, which I just got a good laugh at. But again, it's all pretend, right? Because as she buys the condo, and we get this, oh my goodness, we get this horrible slow motion music video with the song of Noah Cyrus singing, I think the name of the song was Ghost, and she's just taking a bath, and she's turning around, and Ruby's there in the rubber suit. They kiss, and then another twist comes up. We pan out, and it's yet again a video game. It's Michelle perfecting the video game. It's 2.0 of the video game, very Free Guy-ish, right? But we get Rory, who seems to be happy with his mom, proud of his mom, and then he asks, where's the spirits go if they really died? She said, I don't know, maybe they're just around the world, and we get the ball that rolls on the couch. So it's left up to the audience to say, what was real? What was fake? I honestly don't give a damn, but if we were to play in this narrative, I think that this whole thing was fake, and they were just working on the video game. Their plot was in the plot of the video game, a son who has a mom who's obsessed and all that stuff, so I think that's part of the video game. But again, I don't care, because this was just the fact that this is what I'm thinking. This is the only way I can wrap my head around this. Ryan Murphy is trolling us, and the creators of the show is completely trolling us. This was a spoof upon a spoof upon a spoof, and it's just like we can get wackier, stupider, crazier, dumber, and in all those adjectives that you can think of, they just want to put in this spinoff. Reasons why, I have no idea why they thought this was a good idea. I don't want to offend anyone that enjoyed this spinoff, because I know to each his own. Some people, I've read the comments, really, and this kind of just transitions to my overall thoughts of this spinoff. I know there's some people out there that loved it. I've seen some of the big publicists out there and news articles that praise the series, that love these episodes, that just really were gung-ho about it. To each his own, but for me personally, this was so bad. This is easily, for me personally, if you guys follow this channel, you know I watch a lot of TV and I review a lot of TV. This is easily the worst, even with knowing that this is a spoof, and that's the only way I can think of how they made this. Even with that being said, this was some of the worst writing, some of the worst acting. The actors that they gathered, these young up-and-coming actors, I think that they have peaked. I think that there's a lot of room for improvement. I won't give up on those actors. I'm looking at Ruby and Scarlett and Noah, Cyrus, Dylan, some of those other actors that we got in the show, this spinoff. They have a lot of room to grow. Again, maybe it was the direction given to them to be bad, to be terrible, to be a parody of themselves, but neither here nor there. I thought the acting was bad. The script writing was terrible. The dialogue was terrible. Some of the stories were interesting. The mythology, the urban legends, some of them were cool, but some of them were actually part of the real world reality. Some of these situations took place in the real world. I think people mentioned that Pharaoh was actually a real story potentially, but nonetheless, this overall spinoff was a disaster. Which brings me into my rankings of all 7 episodes. Starting off with number 7, I'm going to go with Rubber Woman Part 2. Again, I mentioned the acting. I mentioned Ruby and Scarlett were the worst characters to me, and that was the whole gist of that episode. Their love, which was just so ridiculous and just so bad. That episode is terrible. Coming in at number 6 for me is this finale, episode 7, titled Game Over. The meta-ness of it, the video game, is it real, is it fake? I did not care because it was just terrible overall. And again, you bring in a character, we get Twisty the Clown, we get Ben, we get all these different cameos, but I'm just like, at that point in the episode, I'm just like, this is just stupid. So that comes in at number 6. Number 5 for me is Pharaoh. Again, you can watch my review last week. I wasn't a fan of that episode, and that silly ass kid and that whole twist was silly. Number 4 is Rubber Woman Part 1. Had some moments, I'm not gonna lie, I was in the nostalgia. I was into the first couple minutes and going back to the house and all that stuff kind of got me, but then once we kind of got into the story and all that, it kind of faded off, but that comes in at number 4. Number 3 for me is Ball. Again, I thought the acting of that was definitely over the top, but at least it had some remnants of an interesting story about motherhood and what people will do to have a baby, and the whole thing that shaped out was interesting. Still some bad execution, which brings me to number 2, which is Drive-In. Now, I actually like the idea of propaganda and watching media, and it can make you trigger you to do good things, bad things, or in that case of the episode, ripping people's face off. So the idea was fine. The acting was okay. It wasn't terrible by any means until we got into the trailer and the director and the whole exposition of how he came up with the video was a little bit stupid to me, but I give that number 2, which brings me to number 1. And I know for a lot of people, this is probably their worst episode, but for me, it's Naughty List. I actually thought that episode played into what I was hoping to see in this series. A pretty interesting mythology of the wild man. Santa Claus isn't about giving out good presents, but instead he's murdering kids and murdering bad people. That was kind of cool to me. And of course, Danny Trejo, I'm a big fan of him. And then when it comes to the bro house, I actually thought it was funny. I know, look, comedy's subjective, but those guys being, in the house, and again, the idea of like the social commentary about social media, how people would do anything to be famous, literally, as we see in the episode, them recording someone killing himself, very similar to Logan Paul did a couple years ago. So I thought that was pretty unique. It was a nice way to tie in modern storytelling with modern situations on social media and tie it into the Santa Claus thing. I actually thought that was the best episode, but I know for a lot of you all that was the worst, but hey, that was my favorite of the entire season, which brings me to my last point, which is the preview of season 10 of American Horror Stories, titled Double Feature. With all my negative things I said about this spinoff, American Horror Stories, it doesn't change the past. It doesn't change my thoughts on this franchise. Some of my favorite horror stuff have come from this franchise in the last decade. Murder House, Asylum, Coven, Roanoke, which I enjoyed, that I mentioned, Hotel. There's some Freak Show. There's some really good horror elements within this franchise. So it doesn't change the past. But I would be lying to you all if I would say that I'm not a little bit nervous about the future of American Horror Stories, and particularly American Horror Story Season 10. Ryan Murphy isn't the Kevin Feige of the situation. Like, I don't think he approves every script. I don't think he casts every actor. I don't think he picks all the directors. I think he's just like the producer and like, this is my baby, but I also have other creators that are part of this, and he delegates it to other people. So I don't think that he necessarily had his hand in every single episode. But I still think that there is some things to be said about this series, this franchise. There's some franchise fatigue, in my opinion, in this franchise. And the thing that gets me excited about the 10th season, which, by the way, if you all aren't too familiar, it does drop on August 20th, and the season will be divided into 2 parts. We have the Red Tide, which takes place by the sea, and we have the Death Valley, which takes place by sand. And the things that get me excited about it, we have aliens, we have monsters, and then the thing that really gets me excited, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters make their return. And there's other lore, legacy characters, actors. Billy Lord is back. Finn's coming back. And there's Lily. Everyone's, a lot of the people I like in this world are coming back. But again, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters are held on a higher standard for me. So that gets me excited. Macaulay Culkin's going to be in the show too. So there are things that get me excited, but like I said, I would be lying if I said I'm not nervous about this 10th season, because not even taking away American Horror Stories, there has been this precedent within the franchise that there are some seasons that aren't that great. There are, mostly for me, the second half of a lot of the probably say from seasons 4 and on. And again, I mentioned on episode 1 of my review of this show, I haven't seen the last 2 seasons of American Horror Stories, but the seasons I have seen, it seems like a lot of the second halves of the show kind of loses narrative. It kind of loses its focus. So there are things in this franchise that makes me nervous just from a franchise standpoint. And then you add on to this spinoff that makes me even more nervous. So listen, Ryan Murphy, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters, we have aliens, we have monsters, I saw the trailer for this 10th season. It gives me some Shining vibes with the writer and the wife and the kid and all the different stuff. He seems to be obsessed, and it seems like this area that they're in is like making him go crazy. So I like all that. But we'll see. Fingers crossed. But again, guys, 17 minutes later, let me know, number one, I'm going to wrap up the video here. Let me know your general thoughts on the finale of American Horror Stories. Let me know your general take on this season, this spinoff as a whole. Do you want to see a season 2? I certainly don't if we get more of that disaster type of writing and acting. But let me know if you want to see a season 2 of the spinoff. Let me know your rankings of all 7th episodes, and let me know your general take, your excitement level, your anticipation level for season 10 of American Horror Story. Let's talk about it in the comments. For every single one of you all that watched all 7 of my reviews for the spinoff, I appreciate you. I know I wasn't the most positive, but I was just being honest about how I felt about the spinoff. I wasn't a fan of most of the episodes, but I appreciate you guys supporting the videos, liking them, sharing them, commenting. And again, I'll be here next week talking about I believe they're dropping the first 2 episodes for season 10. So I'll be here next week talking about those episodes. But again, I want to thank you all for supporting these videos. Thank you for sticking on to this part of the video. If you haven't already, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my future reviews. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next one.